Special thanks to our headlining sponsors, ExteNet, ZenWave, and Solid.
I got to tell you, the two guys that are up here today, is we've been serving building owners for the last 30-something years. The property manager and the chief engineer have to become your best salesperson. They're obviously a little crusty at the beginning, but once you prove to them that you add value to the building, they become most appreciative of the services that you can benefit. So I want to go through a couple of slides here, and then I want to turn it over to Tim and to Billy, let them talk some about their buildings, what they've learned, lessons learned. Again, as I shared with you earlier, our goal and objective today is to help you as building owners start to look at ways to get prepared for the next 30 years. Now, I have to ask, how many of you have seen the picture on the bottom left? That is a fiber entrance facility at a multi-tenant commercial office building. We see this on a regular basis. When I shared with you earlier that the ILEX, the telephone company, used to operate in your building, the telephone man would show up at your building, and what did he do? He was a trade. He took pride in his trade. He had a copper distribution plant in the building called CDS, and he maintained that immaculately. And so all of the copper, the riser was all maintained. It was a closed riser. Nobody could go in there and deal with your risers except AT&T or the Bell guy, the telephone man. And once they divested themselves of that infrastructure, this is what happens when you have an open access easement. And an open access easement is where a building owner says, a carrier shows up, who are you? I'm so-and-so carrier. I need to hook up a tenant. That guy's going to go in there and he's going to try to run that wire as fast as he can from the minimum point of entry to the tenant. It's a home run, and this is what it ends up looking like. So one thing that we want to continue to stress upon all of the building owners is to realize that that riser, inside of that riser, needs to be managed as well as you manage outside of that riser, with professional discipline and closing those risers so that not everybody gets in them, because there's liability associated with you allowing any carrier just to come in and pull a wire. If you think about the tenant base today and the economic development increase that your tenants are experiencing on these communication lines, it becomes more and more critical. And by the way, cybersecurity has a physical component to it, and the risers are what we call a contingent liability that building owners need to realize and to deal with and do something about. Now, when we talk to building owners, hang on, back. I'm hitting the button and looking at my laptop here. When we talk to building owners, we like to share with them what's happening in your world. And today, if you think about what's happening, is that the tenant demand for access to broadband, speed, and capacity, you heard me say earlier in the video, is insatiable. We've never seen anything like it. We don't know when there is any end in sight. And if you think about that bandwidth is being driven by mobility and cloud services. All of you have a cloud device sitting in front of you. It's your smartphones. It is a cloud access device, and your tenants are continuing to become more untethered every day. And the only way that you can leverage it to its maximum capacity is to have mobile coverage in a building that's fed with fiber throughout the riser and is fed into the street back to the wireless carriers. If you look at the commercial multi-tenant office buildings today, please no one take offense to this, 97% of all the buildings out there are technologically obsolete. And let me explain to you why. It's obsolete because the copper plant, this is a copper replacement program that's going on in the industry. All the long haul networks for long distance, the metro loops for the local exchange carriers have all been replaced by fiber. The laterals have been replaced by fiber. The last choke point in the marketplace is your building. And your building is, some of them look like that first slide I showed you. It is a true difficult time for carriers to gain access to your building. The average term to deliver an internet circuit to your building is 120 days. That's an industry average. So if you think about that, your tenant, one, they want choice and they want speed and access to the internet as fast as they can. Today they're waiting 120 days. With a neutral backbone in a building, as the lady said, you can turn it up in a day. We turned her service up in 6 hours. So if you put all the carriers in a meet me room, and we like to call it the food court of communication services. I've talked to a lot of real estate folks when I'm talking about neutral host for the carriers and the backbone. And it never did resonate very well. It didn't land. And then when I finally came up and I said, how am I going to help the real estate owners understand exactly the concept? And that's when I came up with the food court of communication services, because if you think about it, in a food court, what does it do? Puts all the food, all the restaurant, it creates productivity for your tenant base so that they don't have to leave the property. This is the exact same scenario. It creates an opportunity to help monetize the carriers and manages the carriers all in one location. If you think about the fiber today, or if you think about the copper plant you have in your building, it has to be replaced, every bit of it. And I would be willing to bet that a large percentage of the building owners today have probably 30 to 40% of the copper in those risers are abandoned cable. So it's really a code violation. There's obviously nobody enforcing that code violation, but it is a code violation to have abandoned copper that is not being utilized in your buildings. Now, communication service providers, you've heard me say it earlier, what do they want to do? They want to move closer to the user. They want to move closer to the point of use. So that means that they're going to start moving into your building. Data centers are moving closer to your building. They're moving closer to the edge. Guys, you are the edge. I mean, that's in essence when you hear people say, oh, it's edge computing, it's moving out to the edge. That's exactly what's happening. You are the edge. You're the hardest to get to, the tenant's the hardest to get to, the most expensive, the longest time frame in order to get to your tenants. So that's why we hope today we're helping share with you some ideas on platforms that can help you improve that. And one thing, as I shared with you earlier, Mr. Crow taught me something that has resonated with me all of my career, and I've been fortunate enough to be on the real estate side and the technology side. I consider myself an interpreter. I spend a lot of time helping the technology industry understand real estate, and a lot of time in the real estate industry understand technology and communications. The one thing he said was, son, you got to realize there's only two things that a building owner worries about. He wants to differentiate his property, and he wants to improve the NOI. That's it, period. If it doesn't fall into that category, don't do it. And when you say differentiate, you're either going to attract new revenue or charge higher rates because you have something that differentiates you, or you're able to retain the tenants that are in your existing building. That's what differentiation is about. And of course, that all improves your NOI. Now we're gonna talk a little bit about, I think I've got one more. No, that's the convergence. We're going to talk a little bit. I want to turn it over to, I'll let Billy kind of go through some of the benefits of what happens on the NOI. Because, guy, when I say NOI improves it, the technology can improve your revenue, and it also can help reduce your cost. Because at the end of the day, what does technology do? It helps you with your occupier experience. It helps you with that tenant experience. It helps reduce your cost. Billy can do, and Tim can do a lot of things with technology today that there's a whole lot of buildings in the country in the multi-tenant service side that can't do it, because he no longer has to send technicians or engineers out to shoot a laser gun up at a heat vent or a cooling vent to find out what temperature it is and change it. So anybody have any questions before I start asking Billy and Tim to talk a little bit about some of the benefits that they achieve out of the technology that's in these buildings? No questions? Billy, would you like to talk to us a little bit about Bank of America Plaza and some of the things that have benefited you and your team and the owners of this property?
So sure, I've been here since 2010. The fiber backbone was not being utilized for building services. Since then, our security cameras, 148 of them, our energy management system, our outside lights that are LED, there's 2 mile of them. We can control the color of those. The tenant experience is what we're all about. You know, the longer our tenants stay with us, the more revenue we can create, and they're going to be here forever. So what do we want to do? We want a climate-controlled environment that's safe, and we want to be behind the scenes. We don't want to have to go like he was saying, Ron said, we don't want to go into your office and change your thermostat or interrupt you while you're on a conference call or in a conference room having a meeting. We want our guys to be able to do that on the fly from their phone. So this building is roughly about 8 months from accomplishing that with the fiber network that we have in place today. And that's due to the ownership wanting us to stay on the cutting edge of what the technology is, but not the bleeding edge. You know, we don't want to be the ones that are out there spending money on bad products. We want to spend money on good products that improve the experience.
Have you had any comments from your tenants noticing the difference between the time you turned down an air to 6 months ago when you had to send an engineer down?
Well, so in that process, what happens is the person who sends the notification that, you know, Joe's office in the corner needs the thermostat turned down. After that is done from a mobile device, there's an automatic email that goes back to that person, or a notification if they're getting push notification that thermostat was changed from 70 degrees to 72, from 70 to 68. So they know exactly what to go tell the executive that was sitting in that office, if they need to at all, that happened. The other thing that we've noticed over the last 6 to 8 years is we do a lot of, or we have here recently built several spec suites from 3,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet and have them ready, move-in ready. And when our leasing people walk in and say, we've got a lease, they want to move in over the weekend, our first phone call is here. Let's get you together with that tenant. Let's find out what service they want so we can have them turned up on Monday. And they're not waiting that 60 to 120 days that Dallas is waiting on. The other thing that we can do is having the fiber already here in the building existing, the tenants that are moving in on the 50th floor, 60th floor, they don't have to pull that fiber from the street anymore and make a home run to their space. The fiber's here. Quick phone call, we hand it to you. Do you want it lit, not lit? Where do you want it dropped to so that you can make your connection? And boom, and what day do you want it? When is your construction complete and your IT stuff going to be set so that we can turn you on and have you ready to go?
Billy, do you see any time in the future that tenants with these platforms can get into more of a self-help mode? Do you see something where tenants could, even because what you're doing is you're accelerating the time frame and the compression of services. So is that something that you see on the horizon?
In some ways, especially with some of the newer companies that are themselves, their business is cutting edge technology. They want to utilize cutting edge technology. They don't want to go into a property that still has the old ways of doing things. It just doesn't look good for them and their business model. So for that, yes, I see that, you know, people want to maximize the time that they're in the office so they get more done and can be away from the office more. By us not having the interruptions, by us being able to provide a service behind the scenes that's safe, clean, and comfortable, I think draws a lot of the tenants here because that's a huge selling point.
Have you sat down and actually done a impact on your NOI from the technology in headcount reduction or?
We haven't sat down and done that. We would like to wait till the end of 2018 and get the energy management.
Got it.
The biggest piece of our puzzle in place. The rest of it has been the technology that just so we can see cameras from our phones. If something's happening at the building, we get a phone call from one of the security guards. We can pick up a phone or a tablet and look at that camera. So most of that's been on the back side of the operations for us to see.
Right.
So Is it a benefit to the tenants? Yes. Is it something we can explain to them? Yes. But I don't know that it's tangible at this point for them.
Okay. Any questions that you have for Billy about Bank of America Plaza before we switch over to Tim? Yes, John.
Yeah, Billy, I was very interested. You said that the tenant experience is a client environment that is safe. You like to operate from behind the scenes. What do you mean by safe? What does safe mean to you for your tenants, and how do they value that?
Well, I would say the first part of being safe is how many of the women or even men here would want to walk through a parking garage that has lights out at 10 o'clock at night or one of the parking lots downtown. That is something that we as a property and ownership don't allow. So when I say safe, it's 148 cameras that see everybody coming and going and being able to monitor card access, knowing who's in the building and where they are after hours. Perfect example, July 7th incident that happened with the police officer shooting here in Dallas a couple of years ago happened right here on the street. We had 6 windows shot out. With our security system, they were able to fall back to an alternate location because they're in the lobby. So they were in harm's way. So they were able to go 2 floors below ground. They were able to have access to all of their systems from the computers there. They were able to see where people were in the building and go evacuate those people and bring them downstairs to a safe place because nobody knew where the shooter was. Is he in a parking garage or another building? While the police department is on the street and in the lobby trying to do what they need to do, as well as they're grabbing people and bringing them in and bringing them downstairs for us to house as well. So that's what I would say a safe environment would be.
Any other questions? So Tim, would you kind of walk us through, I think you have a few slides.
Yeah, there's, I'm not sure if you got them there, Ron. There you go. Just similar to the Bank of America property here, 345 California in San Francisco is almost the exact same age. We all know the old standby, necessity is the mother of invention, and where we sort of started into the fiber inroad, and we're all, let's keep in mind, we're all a work in progress relative to technologies, emerging technologies, and what they enable us to do. But I started out at 345, sort of, you go through an assessment process, looking at systems, the age of them, how intelligent they are, and, and along with that is staying, aware and of code changes and, regulatory issues that we must obviously comply with, but sort of see coming down the road and build for. And so with that, I sort of started out identifying a need relative to code requirements. The California Energy Code is very onerous. We have a net zero energy goal of 2030 to get the city of San Francisco to that point where our consumption is offset by renewables that we bring in, and so the energy code is a big driver for what we did. It started out as the need to bring a new trunk in, and we've got our BAS and our EtherNet trunk and have done a lot there with existing systems and making them smarter. But with the fact that advanced lighting controls must be integrated now as per code for demand response reasons. Power submetering. We have power allowances that are stipulated in our leases, and the governor or the measurement of that are our power submetering system. We went through and gutted the old metering system, put in a smart metering system, and now, literally next week, we'll begin one of the first integrations onto the fiber network that we put in place. But it was born out of, again, necessity. And then Billy and I are fortunate. We are working in properties whose ownership is, does have this culture of wanting to be the best. San Francisco being a very competitive market, it is vital that the building owners and management teams position or keep these properties positioned in the market so they're competitive. And so what started out as a need and to look ahead and prepare ourselves for compliance issues that are now and will continue to roll out, and in partnering with ExteNet, the decision was made to glass the building. And working with the ExteNet team, we put in place building-wide fiber, the bandwidth of which should carry us for the long into the future, I think. We really did, and in any implementation, you're applying lessons learned, and so we've glassed the building and have the building positioned such that tenants can come in, plug and play, turn up, as you say, quickly and readily. But we carved out a piece of that for what we are calling now the building systems network, which is sort of distinct from the building automation system network that is controlling HVAC, some lighting and things. We've created a whole new trunk that will enable us to integrate power submetering, advanced lighting controls, emergency communications. We're set up for a DAS implementation when the ownership is ready to do that. And so it's just continuing to position this building in the IoT space, smart building, in a market that is very competitive.
One thing that we see in the marketplace today, and again, I'd like for somebody to hopefully ask some questions about it, but a lot of the tenant reps today are filling out and building questionnaires that have technology-driven answers. They're asking, what kind of fiber providers do you have in the building? Do you have a neutral fiber backbone? What does it cost to pull fiber in the building? And then also, what kind of mobile coverage do you have, which we'll cover here in a moment. But I mean, those are some of the things that we're starting to see, and I would think California would be kind of leading the pack on tenant requirements for those type of technologies.
You would think, and you made a point earlier on about 97 or some odd % of sort of the teledata infrastructure is obsolete. And even in I talk about the 415 area code and the 650, Silicon Valley, the San Francisco CBD, there is still some archaic stuff going on even in that, playing field. And so what I've tried to do, what our team has tried to do is look ahead, anticipate, and then, there is the joy of ownership when you're faced with a compliance issue, a life cycle replacement, whether it be cooling infrastructure, air handling and things like that. With those come opportunities. And so we had the opportunity to put in place this infrastructure so that tenants can come in. And I think that's where you'll see the revenue streams. Revenue from carriers, revenue just in having a co-location, and the ownership shares along with our partners at ExteNet in those revenues. We're not at the stage yet where we can sort of gauge NOI, but the stage is set, no question.
Are either of you involved with the public safety infrastructure that goes into your building?
We would be. I think we'd be primary with that. Again, we're all at sort of different stages of our development. But I think you're going to see code mandates in that regard become mandates as opposed to a preference by the authorities having the jurisdiction, police, fire, and all of that.
Right.
But that is a component that we have built for, and we're ready to get there.
And the one thing about this building is we've got, 13 public safety agencies on the roof in the broadcast center here in the building.
Yep.
So hopefully some of you are able to see that. A lot of customers in the building. One of the things that we see in the market, and I know they do too, there's a lot of opportunity to monetize the building in ways that a lot of building owners haven't considered in monetization, because you do own a rare piece of dirt in the brick and mortar, and your job has been from the beginning of time of real estate is to improve that value and also improve the tenant experience. I mean, that's really what as these gentlemen do every day. Their job is to make sure that tenant is happy and that they want to stay here for the life of the lease and also renew it. So,
well, it's a good point. Tenant retention, and we're fortunate in that we have an occupancy that is 90% plus, and we've been consistent in that regard. Our leasing team, of course, are falling all over themselves in marketing the fact that 345 California now is fiber ready, and it's all about our competitors, and I'd like to think, with the help of our partners and a strong ownership culture, that we're real well positioned for that.
it's all about differentiation, right?
That's right.
Absolutely.
So, anybody have any questions?
I think I had a question. This topic was about ROI on the fiber, and I guess one of the questions I have is, you talked about compliance being one of the key drivers. When you were selling this system to your building owners and investors, what was the real catalyst for them to buy into signing a deal with ExteNet or investing in a fiber infrastructure?
Well, in our case, the partnership with ExteNet was already in place, and thank goodness, because myself, I was sort of the person in the dark room looking for a light switch, and we clearly identified these needs, and they happen to be compliance needs. But hey, if we're going to build for this, we're going to do it with glass. We're going to do it with fiber. We're going to go high speed. Why wouldn't we? And and sort of that was the catalyst to sort of say, all right, well, why we're doing that, or if we're going to do that, then and again, ExteNet was great in partnering with us in getting this building in this portfolio in that ready state.
And Billy, Mr. Childs back there would say you've probably been spoiled for the last 10 years because you had this in here. So, but
it has been here. That we have been spoiled. That's why I was going to let him answer that question. I did not have to go ask. It was already here. We've just had to massage it to get what we want out of it.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
So what we're seeing even with tenant retention is here at Bank of America, we have a lot of law firms. So the books, the law libraries, all that goes away. What happens? Their square footage drops. So even though you're retaining, you still need to be on the cutting edge to be able to bring new tenants in. And by utilizing the fiber backbone, that's the way we have to do it for the future.
So for the record, I was a leasing agent once for an office building, and then I moved here to Dallas 20 some odd years ago to run a portfolio of shared tenant service buildings. My job was to go meet all the leasing guys, and I would say I'm your shared tenant guy. And for the record, I did think I heard you say that the leasing agents are falling all over themselves because you have glass in the building.
Yep.
What makes this glass different than 20 years ago when the competitive access providers were putting fiber to the building?
Right.
And that was a differentiator. What makes this glass vertically different?
This is, the previous iterations were done piecemeal, and they were tenant driven. Tenant A came in and they would, or they were there and were making their own transition for their systems. They would, partner with our riser management team. and a service provider, and they would, they would put in, we're running interduct and armored fiber, basically in one-offs for each tenant, sort of, but certainly not a concerted, centralized effort. Now, of course, that is all in place, and we're about to sign a deal with a two-floor tenant, co-working type WeWork sort of group, and I think that was a big part of that deal sort of coming about, along with some other building sort of amenities and characteristics that keep us that have us attracted, I think. And so, it's really just, you're keeping up, but if you can just get one or two steps ahead, so that as these other challenges come along, whether it's on the owner side or the tenant side, you're ready, and you're not having to sort of build the ark.
Yeah.
The key to that too, Jeff, is that the building owner is the customer and owner of that glass and that infrastructure. It's not the carrier that puts it in that charges the tenant for the install. So this obviously reduces the tenant expenses because it's dedicated to every floor, to every tenant, and to the building owner's use.
And you're exactly right, Ron. The hardest part to get some of the leasing people to understand, and it's not our leasing team here at Peloton that leases our building,
Correct.
but it is the tenant reps when they come to the building, telling them you need to bring your IT guy. You need to have them bring their IT guy and spend 10 minutes walking with me and having a conversation while they're looking at the space, so that we can show him the value of what we have compared to what you may be looking at down the street.
Just a quick question: as this industry moves to more data analytics, using cloud technology, using blade technology, keeping the data analytics closer to the building, I would think glass and fiber is going to be more important. Vast amounts of data flowing, vast amounts of video flowing. So are you seeing that as something that the tenants are, like you mentioned, all the law offices, medical?
Absolutely. Between the law offices we have here and then Bank of America, who has 22 floors. I mean, everything they have, Bank of America does their own data. ExteNet's not a part of that. The ownership's not part of that because they're on the lower part of the building. They are constantly pulling the copper out and getting fiber ready as they start turning people over in their spaces.
Pretty much every single floor tenant, and these are 20,000+ square foot floor plates, every tenant that comes in here are starting to buy dark fiber back to their co-location facility in the marketplace. As these colo facilities move closer to the building, closer to the edge, customers want to control that glass for a lot of different reasons, for upgradability in the future, for security purposes. Just think about it. If you're a broker, if you're a trader, nanoseconds matter. The one thing I didn't talk on too much is the real issue is reduction of latency. Reduction of latency is cause and effect. It's when you send something and when you receive it. It's the old spinning bubble when you get it when you're watching Netflix. Your buffer emptied out. So what's happening in our world today, in the real estate world, is that tenants now are demanding more access to dark fiber and high capacity wavelength and lit services. It's not just a 100 meg circuit from a Cogent. It truly is 10 gigs for the bigger tenants, or actually they need dark fiber strands for their carriers to come in. And that's where the one fundamental element, you go, well, how does this affect if the tenant doesn't want to use it? Look, at the end of the day, the tenant and the real estate owner is why we're here. We never get in between. Nobody ever gets in between the tenant and that building owner, period. We're here to help that facilitate, and we're starting to see more and more of that dark fiber, those requests come in, just like we're seeing more and more mobile coverage services come in. What kind of fiber capacity? And Billy and Tim can both say, hey, is dedicated fiber to your floor? What do you want?
I think that's one. Go ahead.
If I might add, just to, we talk, speed is sort of this word that goes hand in hand with communication, fiber, and bandwidth, and all of this. I have to tell you, when we last year we completed the infrastructure, the building-wide distribution of fiber. One of the things that we did with guidance from Steve Horton, systems engineer with ExteNet, is we literally built a plumbing system in the building to move our fiber, this Duraline product, and so it's air-blown fiber. We're jetting fiber at 160 to 200 feet per minute, And so, you've got a tech who, want to bring a circuit up on the 17th floor. Someone's down in the meet me, and we watch. All the glass has been put in place, but you're jetting this fiber through this plumbing system that is not only time efficient, it lowers expense in turning something up, but it's also very it's very protected. I mean, you're when you look at your riser and how well we protect those, and then within that, this vertical system that we put in place to distribute the fiber, it's bulletproof.
I'm thrilled that he brought it up. I get fussed at because I love this product, because once you plumb it, and with the 24 count micro duct system, he can put 2,400 strands of fiber in that building. What you do is you plumb it. You plumb in the whole building, and you peel off a micro duct for each floor. That micro duct can handle 144 strands of fiber. Times 24, you do the math. Now all of a sudden, and when you plumb it, you seal those fire stops. Yep. You never have to open that fire stop again. Those fire stops and moisture barriers are sealed. That's when he says you plumb it. It truly is, you're plumbing in this micro duct system. It'll service this building for the next 30, there'll be more. You can put more fiber in that building than just about anybody. So,
Billy, closing comments on ROI on fiber?
Well, if you're not in the Dallas market, I say go for it.
Let's give these guys go ahead.
But honestly, being able to provide a service from behind the scenes and also being able to turn tenants up in less than 24 hours most of the time, I said, it's well worth the investment. You will see a return on your investment.
Let's give these guys a hand. They're the most important people in the room today. Thank you. So next we've got, we're going to talk about the state of the wireless industry. So we've got a number of speakers. Let's get these guys wired up, and we'll be back with you in about 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
Special thanks to our headlining sponsors, ExteNet, ZenWave, and Solid.